Stuart, I think you're new to this vlog. So tell us who you are.
So my name is Stuart Batten and I am the Diocesan Director of Ordinands, which means I work full-time in the diocese, looking after people who are exploring and asking the question, what does God want me to do?
Our passage is Matthew 2, 1 to 12. So this is the arrival of the Magi, or the wise men, or the kings, paying homage to the newly born baby Jesus. So what do you make of this passage?
So I often say to people, if they ask me to their church or to speak, that expect a link with vocation. So
Okay.
I think there is a link here.
Go on.
With vocation. So
I'm looking forward to. Well, no, it's not an avenue I have gone down, but I'm looking forward to it.
So for me, one of the key things of this story is, who are these people? We're obviously not sure who they are or where they're from, but what we are sure of is that they're not from the Jewish faith community. They're from outside.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like thinking about that, because that then gets me thinking that God is at work outside, here, of the Jewish faith community and of the church. And so that God has asked them, invited them, disrupted their lives, and called them to make this journey. And they have obeyed that call. It's not the first time in the scriptures that God uses someone outside of the faith, is it?
Indeed. Cyrus and people like that. Yeah.
And so linking that to vocations, for me, that's really encouraging, because when I have the privilege of talking with people about their vocational story, often people on reflection will then come to realise that God has been at work in their lives even before they came to know him, using the biblical language. And that's key for me in vocations, that God is at work in the lives of all people everywhere, if we have eyes to see and ears to hear, and if we can acknowledge and welcome his work in our lives. So, but often it's only as we look back that we notice it. And I just wonder how their journey progressed after that, and what God did for them.
So grace is often only seen through the rear view mirror, as they say. Yeah. We have to live life forwards, but we understand it backwards, as the Danish theologian Kierkegaard says. So there's that sense that links into what you're saying, isn't there? That actually, that when you frame it with an understanding of God's accompaniment of it, we begin to see things differently and for pennies to drop.
And it encourages me to have the wider view that God is at work outside of the church as well as inside of the church. So, and that's a good thing, because then that means I'm trying to be more alert to what God is doing.
Yeah.
Not just with my Christian brothers and sisters, but outside of the church too.
Yeah, because as John 3:16 puts it, God so loved the world that he sent his only son. So the world includes the church, but is not to be identified merely with the church, as you say. And it would be unthinkable that the God that loves the world would not be at work in that world, both in and out of the church. Yeah. Okay, so these Magi, I just want to drill a little bit deeper, because we could say they certainly appear to be from the East. And being from the East, it seems likely that they're from Persia, so they're Parthians. And some of the recent work on this has sort of pointed out that, of course, Parthia was the empire only second to that of the Roman Empire. And there was a group within the Parthian Empire, the Magi, if you like, the kind of religious civil service or the tribe of priests that were king makers in their time. Josephus talks about this, and he talks about how if you wanted to be a king, you not only needed to be known by the Magi, but the Magi needed to be sponsoring you towards that kingship. So I wonder if the Magi are actually this kind of religious class of Parthians who are kingmakers. Because if you think about somebody like Herod's court, you and I wouldn't get into Herod's court, would we?
No,
You've got to have a bit of clout to get into Herod's court. You can't just turn up in Jerusalem and say, oh, we're on our way to we don't know where, we're following a star, please. But these would have been people, if they were these kind of like kingmakers, who Herod would be interested in seeing and knowing about. Because, of course, Herod had put his money in with the Romans, and the Romans had kind of pushed the Parthians back, but they were watching each other closely. Anyway, the Parthians say, you know, we think there may be a king, and there's something to do with this star and everything. And Herod says, well, come back here later if that's right. And so on they go. So I think there's something quite significant about these Magi then identifying the king with this babe that's born in Bethlehem. But the other thing that strikes me is that when the star comes to a standstill over the place where Jesus is born, they are filled with overwhelming joy. Overwhelming joy. And I know that joy is something you find in the Gospels, but I mean, it's really emphatic. And it reminds me of the fact that there are three sources of joy for human beings, and all of them are realized by the Magi. If you look at the scientific surveys, three common factors of joy in human beings that kind of like elicit joy, if you like. The first is a kind of positive and hopeful outlook. Okay, if you've got that, you're on halfway to joy, and that's what they've got. They're looking for a king, and they think there is a king. Yeah. So, secondly, generosity is something that elicits joy, and they realise that here, in what they are finding in this stable in Bethlehem, is God's generosity towards humankind. And they are caught up in this generosity by their offering of these various gifts that they have. And thirdly, gratitude is a source of joy as well. All the surveys, scientific surveys, suggest that this positive outlook, generosity and gratitude are sources of joy. And all three of them are what they embody here. So it's no wonder that they're filled with overwhelming joy as they come across the Christ child. In contrast to
well, Herod, I would presume.
Herod, yeah, who from whom it elicits nothing but fear, who is not hopeful about the future, who is certainly not generous, but begrudging and wants to keep all that he is, and is not at all grateful for this possibility which is appearing. And then it has that little detail at the end, doesn't it? And so they returned home by another way, which could be regarded as political expediency, but also perhaps there's something here about the Magi realise the irrelevance of Herod relative to what they have come across.
And it says something as well, doesn't it, about that in some way they are attuned to God and God's promptings. That obviously it is God who is directing them to go back another way. And they choose to...
Yeah, and it's a dream, isn't it? Through a dream. And of course, the Magi would have been those in the priestly caste who would have taken very seriously that kind of message. So, yeah. So lots in this passage to think about, lots to preach about. You preaching on Sunday?
I'm not, no.
Oh, well. Well, hopefully
Not
you
yet.
have sown seeds in many a sermon tonight. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Thank you.